of running her global parenting community of over 500,000 women, Black Moms blog, and retreat company, the Self-Care Retreats, Shanicia is an advocate for Black parenting, diversity, and helping women learn to put themselves first. Her passion and dedication has made her a sought-out expert on parenting and self-love. Dr. Janelle Peifer is a licensed clinical psychologist, assistant professor, and researcher committed to working alongside a vast diversity of clients as they navigate their lives. She owns 2 private practices, Peifer Psychology and Onward and Outward Psychology, Psychotherapy in downtown Decatur, Georgia. Brandi Frazier is a mom, wife, sister, and daughter who was originally born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. Brandi has a passion for speaking and making an impact on anyone she meets. Her high energy and zest for life makes her a great friend and a trusted educator. When Brandi became a new mom to an awesome baby boy named Zachary, her life changed. Brandi had an amazing labor and delivery, but ended up being hospitalized due to post-pregnancy complications 13 days after giving birth. This traumatic experience inspired Brandi to create Be Empowered Mama, which is an organization that provides educational resources and services for women throughout their pregnancy and postpartum. Brandi is truly passionate about empowering women, and she truly believes it is a part of her purpose. Dr. Hernandez is an assistant professor in the Department of Community Health and Preventative Medicine and the interim director of the Center for Maternal Health Equity at Morehouse School of Medicine. Dr. Hernandez has a broad background in community-based participatory research, women's health inequities, health policy, and social determinants of health. She has more than 15 years of experience in developing community partnerships and implementing CBPR that engages with diverse stakeholder groups. Dr. Hernandez currently sits on the Georgia's Maternal Mortality Review Committee and on various maternal and child health organizations, including Postpartum Support, International Georgia Chapter, Advocacy Group, and Georgia Maternal Health Stakeholder. She also sits on national organizations, including the American Public Association Committee on Health, Equity, Health Disparities Task Force of the National Preeclampsia Foundation, and many others. Dr. Hernandez has presented her work at various international, national, state, and local conferences. Ashunti Duncan is a 24-year-old mother of 2, ages 2 and 4. Ashunti shared her motherhood journey at the age of 19 working at McDonald's. At the beginning of her pregnancy, she enrolled in Nurse Family Partnership's First Time Moms program to better prepare herself for motherhood. Although she was prepared to care for a baby, she was not prepared for the mental struggles of being a full-time mother, employee, and student at the age of 20. Ashunti experienced postpartum depression and anxiety while trying to prove herself as an asset to her new employer and trying to maintain a 3.8 GPA. With the help of her family as well as her nurse, she was able to find effective coping mechanisms to defeat the depression and went on to receive her BBA and MBA. Finally, Mica Whitfield is a women's advocate with more than a decade of experience in program development and advocacy. She is the Georgia State Director for 9 to 5 National Association of Working Women, where she works on economic justice for working women, overseeing every aspect of the chapter's work on key issues like paid leave, workplace discrimination, and pay equity. In her previous position, she served as the Director of Programs for Healthy Mothers, Healthy Babies Coalition of Georgia. In addition, Mica serves as the Vice President and Advocacy Chair for Postpartum Support International, Georgia Chapter. In this role, she has coordinated advocacy efforts to enshrine Maternal Mental Health Day in the Georgia Code and help secure $1.05 million in appropriations to establish the state's first maternal mental health telepsychiatry line. Mica received her master's in social work from Clark Atlanta University and a BS in social work from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. We have an amazing panel here today, and Mica will lead this conversation as your moderator.
Thank you so much. And I don't know about you all, but I have just been enjoying this conference all day long. The summit has been great. And I just look forward to continuing this conversation with this panel. So this dynamic panel of experts will really highlight the issues Black women face during and after pregnancy. We'll talk about the impact of traumatic experiences on maternal mental health and how Black moms can utilize support systems in their communities to heal. We'll talk about maternal mortality, birth trauma, survival, and how Black women can support other Black women building resiliency and wellness. So with that, I will jump right in. And this first question will be directed towards Brandi, but certainly other panelists, if you have things to add to it, please feel free. Brandi, can you share with us, particularly your postpartum experience and how you advocated to basically save your life?
Yes, I can, Mica. Oh, wow. So talking about postpartum, you have to talk first about labor and delivery. You have to lead your way into it because that piece there is a major part. So with labor and delivery, I mean, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. I pushed out an 8-pound, 10-ounce, big, healthy baby boy in 20 minutes and 11 contractions. So I am very proud of that. And the biggest thing about that was I felt so empowered. I felt so just powerful that I was able to do it because talking to my OB throughout my pregnancy, she always said that, you can go through it. It's going to take a long time. You're a first-time mom. It's going to take at least 2 hours to push out your baby. And I'm like, huh? 2 hours? Oh, no, no, no. So to be able to go through that experience and really just own in my labor and delivery, that was amazing. Throughout the labor and delivery process, though, I did find something where it just stood out to me a bit. And I don't think a lot of women know and think and understand when you're delivering a baby, you're really not yourself. You're not at all. So the advocacy piece is going to be key. My husband ended up advocating for me right there out the gate when it came to being checked, the amount of times I was being checked. I hadn't met my doctor who was going to deliver my baby because my doctor was nowhere to be found until literally it was time to push. So they kept saying, she's doing a cesarean, she's doing something else. And it took my husband to say, no, you check her, to the nurse. You check my wife to see what's going on because she hasn't been checked in 6 hours. And lo and behold, they checked. My baby boy was literally 2 fingers in, almost on his way out. So I had that empowering experience. I'm like, okay, great. I get home. Yes, 13 days later, I felt a little off. I felt a little weird. I had a headache on my left side of my head. And I said, I never get headaches. Where's this coming from? So I went and checked my blood pressure. Yes, I had a blood pressure machine at home that I purchased during my second trimester because as a Black woman, when it comes to high blood pressure, diabetes, all of these factors are just there. And it's already in my family history. So I wanted to stay ahead of it before it got ahead of me. And my doctor had asked me, she was like, why are you checking your own blood pressure? I said, because, and why didn't you tell me I need to check it at home? I checked my blood pressure. It was astronomically high. It was like 163 over like 106. That is not me at all. I go to the doctor and they, check my blood pressure and they're like, whoa, it is very high. Okay, it's protein in your urine as well. That's postpartum preeclampsia. I'm like, what? What do you mean? Go to the hospital right now. You need to go there. And she said, do not go home. Go to the hospital because if you hadn't come in today, you could have died from a seizure or stroke over the weekend. Thank you so much for coming in. So I go to the doctor. I go to the hospital. I'm 13 days in with my fresh baby. And moms, you know it. 13 days in, you still don't feel right. My hips hurt. Granted, I pushed him out in that record-breaking time, but I was broken up. My hips hurt. Everything just hurt. And that headache that I had that started over here ended up going over my entire head. And I'm sitting there and I'm in so much pain. They started me on a magnesium drip. I'm in there begging them to stop the pain from my head. They're giving me Percocets. I've never taken anything like this in my life. And they're just loading me up on it. They said, you know what, sweetheart, you're going to have to just deal with it. That's what they told me. You're going to have to let it run its course. So I spent 3 days there. And that was the most traumatic 3 days I've experienced in my entire life. I'd rather have 15 more kids than to do what happened to me again. And the advocacy piece, and to know that if I didn't literally take my blood pressure, if I didn't own it in the second trimester to purchase a high blood pressure machine, instead of just trusting that one visit per month that you get, one every 4 weeks, that's not enough. That's not enough to track what's really going on. I could have died. And if I didn't listen to my body, I could have died. If I would have just just said, hey, you know what? I'm going to charge it to the game of I'm tired. We haven't slept. We got a newborn. I said, no, something doesn't feel off. And I pushed for that. And I ended up pushing even more at the doctor's office because the CNA was taking inaccurate blood pressure readings. She took it on the cuff and she said, oh, you're fine. Your blood pressure is 117 over 72. I'll never forget these numbers. I said, no, I just took it an hour ago. She said, you're fine with the manual cuff. I told my doctor that, and my doctor was like, yeah, that should be okay. I said, can you check my blood pressure? She said, why would I check it? My CNA just did. I said, no, I think they're doing inaccurate readings. Can you check it? She did it with an attitude. She said, okay, I'll check it. She put the cuff on me and she checks it with the mask on. All I know is she releases it. She looks at it. She steps back. She takes her mask off and said, you were right. And she stood against the wall like, whoa. So what other moms are y'all sending home if I hadn't said anything? If I didn't challenge what you said, if I didn't advocate for myself, who's going home and not making it that next day? So that's the whole piece of my story that just really just makes me absolutely push advocating for yourself, because your life depends on it. It's not just like, oh, you need to do it to feel better about yourself. No, your life depends on it.
Yeah. Wow, that's powerful. And like using your own experience and thinking about that and how you used your voice and demanded, with thinking about even the presentation earlier about advocating for yourselves, like there were so many points in there where you had the language, you used your voice, and, even telling your doctor, no, I'm going to say it again. Like, I need you to, take my blood pressure. It's so powerful. What tools did you feel like you had to do that? And how would you encourage other mothers in similar situations?
Oh, excellent question. First, it would be own your health and purchase a high blood pressure machine. If we're going to talk about during pregnancy, you need to have one. They're on Amazon for $19.99. Okay. If you need one, call me, slide in my DMs. I will send you one because it is that important. So the first thing is just to own your health and know what your numbers should be and know your family history. Know and be very aware. So that would be self-awareness. Know your body. I knew my body. I would tell people this: listen to your body because it whispers symptoms. Listen. It's always telling us when something is off. But do we listen? We're so much on the go where we just say, you know what, I'm okay. No, it's none of that. As Black women, as Black mothers, as period, we cannot just say, it's okay. We can't afford that. We cannot afford that at all. The next thing I would say is do your research. Know what's not normal. Know for a fact that, all right, if my blood pressure hits above this, or for instance, if I'm feeling aches in my legs and pain, or if I don't have to literally feel broken down to have something going on that's wrong. Just know that if it still feels off, trust yourself and be self-aware. Like I said, no one should know you better than you. You are the subject matter expert of your body. I don't care about the white coats. Granted, they're there to serve us, to help us along our journey. They're the subject matter experts, but who is the better subject matter expert of me than me? Me, I am. So I want women to know that you have to be the subject matter expert of you. So if someone tells you, no, you're okay. Like I told them, I said, no, I'm not. I need you to take this blood pressure because it's not okay. Oh, okay. If I hadn't said anything, what could have happened? And then I would add this last piece in. Go to the doctor sooner than 6 weeks. Schedule your appointment to go in. I do not care what it is. That 6 weeks is way too long. If you can get in 2 weeks after you have that baby, if you can go once a week leading up, do it, because so much changes and they don't prepare us properly to go home. We're never prepared properly. You're supposed to leave with this baby. We're all broken. Everything else is going on. We're healing. But then they're like, okay, focus on the baby. What about me? Wait a minute. What about this mama? I don't feel good. What about me? So knowing that you should make sure that you're doing your research to know what to expect. Those are the top things. There's so many more, but if I had to say out the gate, if I had a mama sitting across from me right now, I would have this list ready. Say, girl, come on, let me show you what we're going to do, because I want to make sure I save your life, because who would have known what could have happened?
Wow. Yes, you had so many things in that. And I'm looking at the chat too. Folks are saying a lot of those similar things, and so powerful that you took control of it. It makes me think of a mantra that even I've been practicing. I'm in control, even, and I heard earlier, I'm building a new relationship with my body, my rules, so I think it kind of encompasses all of that when you step into that advocacy role, when you step into knowing that you own your body, that you know what feels right and you know what doesn't. And so I thank you so much for bringing that up. I'm just going to transition a little bit. Dr. Hernandez, we know Black women are dying at alarming rates, but we don't often hear the connection between maternal deaths and maternal mental health. And can you share just a little bit about that connection and how you see that and how that comes up in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mica, and thank you, Brandi, because mental health is really involved in what I'm about to talk about. Much of the focus in maternal mortality crisis is on the physical causes of death, but mental health deserves a more prominent place in this conversation. There's so many links between mental health challenges and maternal health, as they directly or indirectly increase these morbidities and mortalities. Psychiatric disorders in pregnant women and following childbirth have been shown to increase the risk of death from obstetric and medical conditions in pregnancy, as well as suicide up to 1 year. A lot of people don't know that globally, suicide is the leading cause of maternal death. And in the US, we've been finding individual state-based data strongly supporting a higher than previously reported maternal mortality rate stemming from suicide and other self-harm. And we're also noticing some hotspots. So New York, Colorado, California have also been reporting higher than normal maternal deaths related to maternal mental health. A lot of how common mental disorders and severe mental illness, they increase your risk for a lot of these different outcomes. So for instance, preterm births, fetal growth impairments are linked to maternal mental health. Furthermore, women with severe mental illness also have increased risk of preeclampsia, antepartum and postpartum hemorrhage, placental abruption, and stillbirth. And a lot of these problems are the leading causes of maternal mortality, particularly among Black women. You heard Brandi talk about preeclampsia. I mean, that's a major one. There was also in a 2018 report from the 9 maternal mortality review committees, they found that 7% of pregnancy-related deaths were associated with underlying mental health conditions. And of those deaths, approximately 42% had patient-related mental health contributing factors, such as the absence of social support systems and a lack of adherence to medications or treatment plans. But then another 27% had provider-related mental health contributing factors, such as ineffective treatments or failing to screen. And we know a lot of Black women are not being screened for maternal mental health disorders. Out of all pregnancy-related deaths, 63% are preventable. If these women had access to mental health supports and treatments, they may still be alive. And while Black mothers are more likely to suffer from maternal mental health challenges, they're less likely to receive treatment, whether it's during pregnancy or after birth, and that's important. A study that we conducted at Morehouse School of Medicine in partnership with the Center for Black Women's Wellness found that 60% of women who reported mental health challenges were not even referred to support services or counseling for further help. And we know that Black women are less likely than white women to initiate or complete treatment. There are many factors, such as lack of access to healthcare, less screening for mental health conditions, particularly in women of color, how Black women talk about mental health, mental stigma, lack of insurance, finances, and then this cultural stigma. Brandi alluded to this before too. There's this expectation of strength from Black women, and a lot of this results in underdiagnosis, misdiagnosis, or just a complete disregard of what's happening with Black women. All women deserve effective and culturally relevant prevention, screening, and treatment. And as a Afro-Latina, as a mother to a Black girl, as a descendant of countless Black women, and most importantly, just being a woman in this world, I cannot ignore the crisis that continues to perpetuate racial inequities and affects many of my sisters. And despite what's happening with maternal mental health in Black women, it's still understudied, and that's a huge problem in our communities.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez. And just as we are discussing, maternal mental health, Black maternal mental health being understudied, how do we include more Black women in research and making sure their voices are centered?
Yeah, absolutely. We have to be intentional. We have to do it with purpose. We have to make sure that we center Black women's lived experiences. And we need to remember that their voices are legitimate sources of knowledge. When we center Black women in research, it ensures that strategies are focused on culturally relevant care, that they're regarded as important. We also need to center Black researchers. We have a lot of research that's conducted not by Black researchers. And also, although Black researchers have the knowledge and expertise, they're oftentimes left out or brought in some type of advisor capacity, knowing full well that they can lead the research. Their lives and experiences are often not centered in the development and execution of solutions. And that's why we haven't closed the racial disparities gap. This is why. I mean, Black women throughout the country lead critical work to address a multitude of inequities, often with limited support and resources. And concurrently, they're also dealing with multiple systems of oppression that are designed to devalue and derail their work. So for instance, the study that I participated in and led with Center for Black Women's Wellness, we only received $10,000, but we had white counterparts who received $300,000 to do actually less work in working with a Black population. Another thing that we can do is work in partnership with Black-led organizations. We need to trust Black women to lead these research efforts. They are the ones that know the solutions that work in the communities. The strength of community partnerships lies in the ability to go beyond the individual need and incorporate change at a systemic level to meet the diverse needs of our communities. Ensuring that Black women are involved in the whole research avenue it ensures that the solutions are there and that they would get to the community. This is what makes our work at Morehouse School of Medicine and the work that I conduct. When we embarked on our study, it was important that we follow these principles, that we prioritize centering the experiences of Black women. They were the leads in the research. They were also on the community advisory board. They centered their experiences. And this was a way to rethink conventional research practices. And taking a non-traditional approach within a system that is, quite frankly, built on a white supremacist research model will only ensure that we get to do the work that we get to do and that we find the solutions to finally help our women.
Wow. Yes to all of that. Yes to all of that. That is awesome. I hope you all were taking notes in the chat because that was a lot of powerful information being shared. Dr. Peifer, want to talk to you about how do we help Black mothers deal with the secondary trauma? And, we hear in the stats, Dr. Hernandez shared with us a lot of, statistical information surrounding the maternal mortality rates and, the impact during their pregnancies. How do women deal with that secondary trauma of hearing these things? And how do you work with them in that process?
Oh, Mica, that is such a good question. And I'm reminded of my own pregnancy. I found myself really cursing those Google and Facebook algorithms that somehow found out that I was Black and pregnant and then decided to push every nightmarish story about how Black women are ignored and undervalued and at risk at a time where I felt most vulnerable. And so, and like you're saying, that secondary trauma, and I think that we experience it even more now in this year that we're going through, where we're looking at the disproportionate impact on the Black community by COVID-19, this racial justice reckoning we're having, and then the intersection as Black women of the maternal, mental, and physical health crisis that we're experiencing. So I think the first thing is acknowledging that you're swimming in systems that are filled with trauma and being able to notice what those signs of trauma are as they show up in your life, right? So being able to see that in relationships, and I often talk about a trauma reaction can look like irritability, can look like agitation, can look like anger, and oftentimes for good reason. And it can also show up in a need for control, when you feel like you're in this world that's out of control, right? So I think first being able to name and see the signs of it and to work in your relationships with other people to be aware. And I think the more that we have culturally competent researchers who are doing this work, the more that we have culturally competent providers, the better support that the psychological community is going to be able to offer. Because that wasn't the part of my training, to be able to understand what complex PTSD and the impact of racism as a complex ongoing trauma looks like for Black women. So I think that's that first piece. And I think the second is also to be able to recognize when to take a step back from the trauma-inducing information, stimulus, media, being able to create buffers that can be protective factors as we talk about them as you're dealing with this traumatic information. So knowing when to disconnect, having limits on social media, being able to have self-care practices. And I don't mean just like baths or massages, but really limits, boundaries, advocating, like Brandi said so beautifully. There is this experience of being able to self-advocate and to have communities of support that support you in doing that, rather than trying to shut you down, or rather than telling you that you are being too intense, right? Well, as Black women, we're often told that we're too intense. And I have this reaction as a mother myself, where I'm like, I don't know who's gonna take care of me besides me. I don't know who's gonna take care of my family besides me. Like, if I sit back and waited for what you were willing to give me, I might be dead, right? So then I think this, being able to think of those buffers, like those things that shore you up, whether that is social connections, whether that is meditation, mindfulness, being able to care for your physical health, knowing when to disconnect, having those boundaries, and having a good provider, a mental health provider, a therapist, a pastor, somebody who you feel like you can process this with, so that you're not just internalizing it and shoving it down and continuing forward. Being able, we know when it comes to trauma, the trauma continues if it's ignored. But if we're exposed to, if we pushed into it with support and tools, that's where we're able to engage in a different way with it. And then at an advocacy and at a system level, what I would like to see more of, and I know that there are some really wonderful people even here right now who are doing this work, is to not just stop with the disparities, like that's the starting point, and then disentangling the why behind it. So we know this report that came from the Surgeon General, it's kind of easy. We see this parallel process with COVID-19. We're like, we see these disproportionate rates of mortality due to COVID-19 and with maternal mental health as well in the Black community. So then you really start to look at the why behind that. And what we know is it's racism, right? So when the Surgeon General was able to say that it's not, when you control for all of the other factors that could contribute to these differences, and one of the biggest predictors is the lack of cultural competence in the healthcare providers and mental health care providers. And so we need to start to really, as we are shoring up our self-advocacy, work to start to change those systems. And I think that at least in my experience, being able to work towards that change is also a way to encourage some of that post-traumatic resilience and growth that we know about, that feeling that I'm not sitting here constantly reminded of those disparities without an understanding of why they are, or even, and how to change them. So I think a little bit of knowing and being able to understand and recognize those trauma reactions, being able to work in partnership with a healthcare provider who understands that, like a mental health care provider who understands and can help walk with you through that process, connecting into that self-advocacy, and then at a systems level, creating change. Us working together in a community to say, this isn't okay, this needs to change. We're not just going to, we're not sitting here, and I know that people are already doing that. So there's great organizations to get connected with and feel that you're able to make a change.
Expand on that a little bit. I think we all hear, I mean, I know, I've got friends, a ton of friends that have them been in this work. You hear it all the time. I think there's, plenty that was shared in the chat just about, specific birth stories that were just downright traumatic. We talk a lot about maternal mortality, but the near misses, right? All of the near misses we can't even count for all of the times that women have been, close to these really traumatic experiences during birth. And even if it wasn't physical, maybe some even emotional, maybe the way they were treated by, the people that were caring for them, their providers. So like, with all of that and hearing those, those stories, and if there's women that are listening now that, maybe they didn't even realize that I had birth trauma, right? Like, this is like a whole new space for me. This happened to me, but I just moved on, right? Like, are there some, like, and I know you shared a few things just then, but are there like some key places you would advise them to start, like, in their process?
Oh, yes. That is a really good question. And so in thinking about some good places to start, one of the things more recently, the Atlanta Birth Center has started some free virtual groups that are targeted to Black moms. So checking them out, that's Boca Mamas, Amanda Mullen and her team that's doing some birth equity work really spearheaded those. So to checking out some of the resources that are available through PSI as well, to get some support and connect with providers who have an understanding of what birth trauma looks like and how to treat it, right? How to be able to engage so that you're able to learn some skills to talk about and have a narrative to be able to talk about what your experience was, where you didn't have the support that you needed, and then be able to have some tools to be able to engage with that trauma in a way that you can move forward. I would definitely suggest using some of those resources. And I think that it's helpful I often encourage mothers, particularly Black mothers, to be able to have the experience of telling the narrative of your birth. And all of the complexity of it is so important. Being able to share what that felt like, what your experience is. Again, not just shoving it down and moving forward, but being able to talk about it. So I think, yeah, some of those support resources, engaging with a provider who has expertise in perinatal, postpartum, maternal mental health, and then being able to, at this sort of basic level, make sure that there's space for you to tell the narrative of your birth. Mm-hmm.
That's really good to be able to tell that in your way. And, I know for some folks, they might be in different stages of that process, right? It's sometimes you're just not ready to tell it yet. It's too traumatic. You haven't, like you said, you don't have the words, the language, the narrative for it. And then, you can see when the healing has happened and women are able to share their story from a place of empowerment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that's just amazing. And I'm very happy that you brought that up. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, building off of that, Ashunti, I just want to talk to you for a second about your, motherhood experience. I know your after-birth experience, was filled with a lot of stressors and responsibilities. And, I'm sure some of that, also was involved in your pregnancy. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you lean into your supports to help you through the postpartum?
Well, thank you for having me here today. Basically, my experience was a little bit different. I went into labor at 34 weeks, and I had been working with my nurse to get my blood pressure down. My legs were swelling. The week before I went into labor, my baby's heart rate was all the way up to maybe like 115. So they had me on the monitor. And then once it came back down, they just sent me home. So as I'm leading up into going into labor, I didn't realize that, something may be wrong. I may have this baby early. I was in school. I actually gave birth right before final. Like, it was finals week. So I go to the hospital. They're like, well, we think your water broke. Okay. They bring 5, 6 doctors in, they're telling me all the things that could go wrong. So at this point, I'm 19 years old. I'm scared. I'm, stressing out. They're telling me that if I don't start dilating, then they're going to cut me open. And I'm just terrified. I'm completely terrified. No one just said, everything's going to be okay. It was all about what could be wrong. And as a first-time mom, you don't need to know what could be wrong. You need to know what could be right. And so once I had my son, I started a new job. So right at my 6 weeks, I started a new job. I went to school, and I'm trying to take care of this baby that they're telling me he's not eating properly, he's underweight, He may have jaundice. We actually got him checked maybe 3 or 4 times for jaundice because he was too light to be my baby. Like he was too yellow, and he's high yellow, and as you can see, I'm not. So I'm thinking, like, I don't know what could be wrong. And my mom, she's like, let me help you. But postpartum for me was keeping him close to me. I felt like I had to be that powerhouse. I had to be the super mom. I had to be the super student. I had to be the super employee. Because at this point, I'm a young mother, I'm Black, and I'm the youngest one in my office. So they're already looking at me like she doesn't know nothing. She does not know enough. So I'm in overdrive trying to prove that I do know. I do have the experience. I can make it all happen. And what I've learned is trying to be great at everything causes you to fail at everything because you're not giving anything 100%. And that's really hard on you. I feel like as a Black woman, that's hard. That's hard because no one ever says, well, the dad's not doing what he's supposed to do. They're not going to say, your coworker didn't do what they were supposed to do. It's on you. They're not going to say the teacher did not give you the tools to be successful. They're going to say you didn't study hard enough. You didn't take care of your child. People come to your house, you're married, got kids, and they'll say, well, why don't this woman clean up? Why is it always on us to be the responsible one, And so my mom, she stepped in and she was like, Ashunti, you need help. You cannot do everything by yourself. I was to the point where if the parking lot was full at work, I wouldn't go. I was too drained to walk across the street. I was too drained to, spend that 5-10 extra minutes playing with my son. And it was really hard because I didn't want to ask for help. I didn't want them to say, well, you knew what you were getting yourself into when you got pregnant. And I feel like that is the number one thing that Black women say to other Black women, Black moms. And it shouldn't be like that. It should be a helping hand. And I feel like I got that from my nurse. My nurse helped change the dynamic in our household. She was able to come in and say, I see you need help. You can't hold that baby and do your homework. You can't sit here and just sleep all day. She was actually the one that said, Ashunti, holding the baby too close is also postpartum. It's not just wanting to be away from the baby, because that's what I thought it was. I thought it was just, I don't want the baby around me. And I was trying so hard to prove that I didn't have postpartum that I was really sending myself into a deeper depression. And so having my mom and my sister and my nurse come in and say, let us help you. Let us take him for 5-10 minutes. Let him, play on the floor for a little bit. Give yourself some space. Give yourself some time. It's okay to go outside, take a walk, let him sleep. Let lion baby sleep, You don't have to sit there and watch him every 5 seconds.
Yeah, thank you, Ashunti. And I was just, checking some of the chat, and it seems like, a lot of folks are just resonating with what you've mentioned, not having the energy, like you said. What stuck with me when you said you couldn't even walk across the parking lot, right? Like just the emotional drainage of everything that was happening and feeling like you have to have an S on your chest, and I think that goes back to what we, has been a theme throughout this event, having this strong Black woman syndrome. And you mentioned just not wanting to even admit that, I might be, experiencing some, postpartum, symptoms related to, your mental health, and not even want to realize that for yourself. And so, first of all, just thank you so much for sharing your story. And, I think that it continues to reiterate how important it is to lean upon our support, right? Our village, and then even the extended village. You mentioned the nurse, Shout out to the doulas I know that are on, you know, that are providing that additional support and being that extended village for folks. And thinking about community, Shanicia, I just want to talk about just the amazing platform that you have built through Black Moms Blog. And first of all, how, you know, you went about identifying the need for it, and how did you build such a strong online platform?
Yes, so I've always said that parenting is such a white conversation. And you hear it a lot when you talk to white women about their pregnancies. It's a super fluffy conversation. And the only thing they're concerned about is, you know, their nose and their belly getting bigger and their fingers swelling and not being able to fit their wedding rings. And then you speak to Black women, and it's almost like you stepped into this alternative universe because the conversations are just completely different. I think when it came to building community, for me, I had my daughter at 23 years old. I got pregnant with her at 22. And I've always said that getting pregnant at 22 felt like being pregnant at 16 years old. I feel like I had no support. It was at a time where a lot of my friends were graduating from college. They were entering their masters. They were traveling the world. And here I was, like, literally studying hypnobirthing to figure out how to have this baby. And that was 8 years ago. My daughter will be 9 this year. So almost a decade has passed since this time. But during that time, I just experienced a lot of aloneness. My partner and I were young. We didn't know what we were doing. We were trying to maintain what we thought was the right way to do things. And when I would turn to the internet, I saw white women that were sharing their experiences, and they were married and, you know, lived in a 3-story house and the white picket fence and the 2 perfectly groomed children. And then I saw Black women, but the reality was I saw Black women that looked like it looked like white women that had been poured over with brown paint. They were still trying to, like, emulate this experience of perfect white motherhood. And there wasn't anybody who looked like me that was going through the things that I was going through, who was still concerned about, okay, I'm only 23, 24 years old. I have a baby. I still want to go out and enjoy my friends. You know, it was just all of these things. And so I created this platform as a response to that. It was out of a responsive need of me needing to build my own community. And also at the time, just needing an outlet. I was giving everything to my family. My relationship was falling apart. I had nothing to turn to. And so I started this platform, and it did immediately, it just blew up. And I remember going back to telling friends that I wanted to start Black Moms Blog. And they were like, why do you want to start, you know, a platform about Black motherhood? They didn't understand. But a lot of these women were also not children. And the Black women that I knew that were mothers, they didn't even know that they didn't even have the words to express what they were going through because nobody was talking about it. And so once again, this was 5 years ago that B&B has been around. And at this point, we've built a global community of almost 500,000 women. We're all over the internet, from Instagram to Facebook. We have a private Facebook group with over 20,000 women in it. And when I talk to women every day, you know, about their experiences with motherhood, I'm just like, hey, speak your truth. I love Brandi's story so much because, once again, when we're talking about this conversation of motherhood, there are so many Black women that share this story, that talk about not being able to use their voice and speak up, not being able to say that this is not okay because we're afraid of being called ghetto. We're afraid of being called loud. We're afraid of being, you know, of doing too much. And we're so hard on each other because it's almost like generational trauma that's been passed down to us. When we've spent our lives watching our mothers do everything, we've seen our grandmothers be single mothers, and it gets to us and we're like, why can't I do this? Like, why don't I have the strength to do what I need to do? And somehow we've also developed this term, I'm a strong Black woman. I'm not a strong Black woman. And I think we have to get out of that concept. The only way that we do that is by holding spaces just like this and looking at each other. And I'm listening to Ashunti talk, and I got emotional because you could literally feel her heart in what she was saying. So when I look at a platform like Black Moms Blog, I created a space within the already marginalized space of motherhood to talk about and positively reflect Black parenting. Because what I realized is that the loudest is not always the majority. But when you look at Black representation, when it comes to the internet and television, it's not what I see here. It's not the conversations that I have one-on-one. It's not what I see when I have sister circles and I have community meetings and events with women. This is what's real. And that's what needs to be celebrated. And I want to just go a little bit deeper besides that point. It's 2021, and we're just now getting to a place where we can actually celebrate being a Black mom. There has been one book that has led people through pregnancy, What to Expect When You're Expecting. Have y'all read that book? And you pick it up because it's like, this is what you're supposed to do. You have a baby, you get pregnant, you're supposed to read this book. This is what I'm supposed to, get into. And I'm reading it and I'm like, this is not helping me figure out anything. This is not doing anything for me. It's not talking to me about using my voice. And just like Brandi said, just like Ashunti said, I had my daughter at 23. My daughter's father went with me to every single appointment. And because I was 23, I was not married. Because I was Black, every time we stepped into that doctor's office, I was treated like a statistic. Every time I went into a doctor's office, they were pushing me towards birth control and asking me why I was in here having a baby. Why wasn't I in school? Why wasn't I working my job? There was such a hypocrisy when it came to Black pregnancy. And so going back to that book, I read this book and I walked away with nothing. I didn't walk away feeling like I knew what to do. And I think this book's been around for 20 years. And so to counter that, I wrote a book. I wrote a book about Black pregnancy. It's called Oh Sis, You're Pregnant. And it's a book for us about Black pregnancy, and everything that y'all talked about on this video is in here. Black maternal health, hormones, finances, single parenting, and especially, like Ashunti said as well, getting back to yourself. Because motherhood is not just about being a martyr to your situation, because we're still people too. And we have to normalize women being mothers and mothers being women, because it's two separate things. And when we become moms, we literally think that we have to give up everything for our children and our families. And we completely forget to be human. So when it comes to the original question of you asking me, why did I start Black Moms Blog? I started Black Moms Blog because of this space. I started Black Moms Blog because I didn't want to see any other woman going through what I've experienced and what I've heard other women experience. I wrote this book so that we would have our own Bible to pregnancy, so that we would have our own stories to tell, so that we wouldn't just be talking about swollen feet, but actually talking about things that matter, talking about how do we wear our hair during labor. You're not going to find that in a white book about pregnancy. You're not going to find, how do I talk to my mom about not wanting her in the room with me when I have this baby? That's a real conversation. And I started all of my platforms and my businesses as it relates to retreats, books, the blog, to give Black women a safe space to say, I can freaking exhale. I can take a breath, and I'm among sisters, and I'm building my community, because being a mother without community is death. And we see it every day.
Wow. Being a mother without community is death. Wow. That's powerful. And one thing that you said that stuck out for me, well, so many things, but you said so many of us are trying to fit Black motherhood into like the white motherhood norms that we saw, right, from reading the books. And I remember, crying my first pregnancy because my son didn't have his own room. Where am I wanted to paint the baby room like I saw on TV. And I was so sad about it. Like, I'm having this baby, I don't even have anywhere to put him, but again, seeing those norms. And so I thank you so much for, being brave enough to create a platform for women. I follow you on Black Mom Blog, and I've certainly have gotten a lot out of a lot of the conversations and that I participate in the photos. And so I thank you for creating that space. What advice would you give for, folks that are listening that want to provide some support, especially since, we're no longer kind of living in this, and then add on COVID, we're not able to connect, one-on-one, but, maybe they want to provide connection to someone, or they want to figure out how to do that themselves online. Like what would you suggest they do to plug in?
I feel like everything is a manifestation. And so when it comes to plugging in, you have to plug into yourself and really sit down with yourself and say, what is it that I need? And you don't have to be superwoman. I think that's the part of this panel that I really enjoyed hearing is women really just bare their soul. Like, yo, this was horrible. Brandi was like, I'd rather have 15 more kids than go through what I went through. You know, Ashunti's talking about, you know, just the trauma that she had to overcome to be a sufficient mother. I seen a post online recently, and it was a woman saying that she lost her child at a store or somewhere. And immediately I took a deep breath because I was like, ooh, you know, because that's something that as parents we might go through, but we may not admit that online. And so she's telling the story about she lost her child and she just started screaming. My child has on a red shirt, blue pants, green shoes. My child has a backpack on. They have brown hair. It's in braids. And she started screaming at the top of her lungs. And within like 2 minutes flat, someone was like, oh, here's your son. He's over here playing with whatever. And the reason I bring that up is because this woman so vulnerably shared, I don't care how embarrassed I am. I lost my child. I need to find them, right? So in the same way, we got to think about that when we look at community. Like we're such a jaded society now. Like everything you look at online is like, you know, if your friend says this, just cut them off. This person does this, just forget them. You don't care. And that's not healthy. Like that's traumatic. If you're in a space with people where you're constantly, you know, I don't care about anybody, I'm just going to do me. You can't do that as a mother because you have other people around you that literally feed off of you, especially if you're currently breastfeeding. You need support. And so when it comes to like, how do I usher in support into my life? Are you asking for help? And I'm not saying that as an accusation, but what I mean is open yourself up to saying, I need help. Please come help me. Stop trying to fit into your old friendship circles. You can't show up to everything. I can't be there for you all the time. But what you can do is come over here and help me with this baby while I do laundry. Can you please come watch my baby while I take a nap? I need help. And a lot of times looking at our parents, you know, our mothers say, they want to compare us to them. They want to say, you know, I did it. You're strong. You don't need anybody. You got this. That is traumatic. Please understand at the same time that our mothers are only doing the best that they know how. And so it's not a direct personal attack on you if your mom doesn't understand you. You know, and I hear this all the time in talking to women about their mothers. I talk about this conversation I had to have with my own mother when I was pregnant in my book. My mom was doing what she knew best to do. And her telling me or her acting like I didn't need anybody was because she had to go through that. She just didn't understand it. And I couldn't blame her for that. And over the years, my relationship with her has become so much better because I've learned not to blame her for her way of thinking. I'm learning that I can do it. I can do it different. I can do it better. And a lot of that is because I've ushered in this community of women that have really surrounded me. And I want to say this, like with B&B, it has provided so much for me. I classify it as its own entity. It's become so much bigger than I have been. It's become so much for so many women. So many women have made their friendships and their sister circles based off of this community by reading these articles, joining these conversations. And so for any woman that is struggling, my first admonishment to you is just to show up for yourself by saying, what do I need? If you're not strong enough to be your everything, there's nothing wrong with that. You never hear white women saying, I'm a strong white woman, Asian, I'm a strong Asian. We're the only people that think that strength in that kind of way is a badge. That is a response to trauma. I'm not strong. I need help. I need to cry. Please come help me. My daughter is 8 years old right now. And the only way that I am where I am in my life, whether it be through my business, anywhere, is because my friends really took care of me. And they took care of me not blindly because they believed in me. When I needed a babysitter, when I needed help, when I needed a conversation, when I needed food, they were there for me. So don't be afraid to ask. And if you're finding yourself in a position where you're not getting the answers you need, keep asking, but ask somebody else. So.
Don't be afraid to ask. And also first ask yourself, what do you need?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna turn to the chat here in the Q&A so I can get some of the questions from our Q&A. One person said, how can we make this a standard of care? This was from a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, I'm just now seeing them, but possibly just speaking to how do we, make, support a standard of care. Maybe that's what they meant with that. So I'll throw that to the panelists. How can we normalize support and even maybe throw in, the trauma conversation as a part of maternal care? Any thoughts around that?
I want to answer that question about standards of care, because you have to understand that when you're talking about making a standard, if you're asking that, then you already don't have the standard. And so you got to be real extreme with it, y'all. You got to be so extreme when it comes to when you're coming from a place of being starved of a certain thing. Look at it any kind of way. If I haven't ate food in 4 days, when you give me a plate of food, I'm going to devour it. And so when it comes to self-care and loving yourself, you have to get to a place where you have to be so selfish with your time and understand that who you've been showing up as your whole life, you're not showing up that way anymore. So that means that you're going to get some heavy pushback from those around you. You're going to get pushback from people that are no longer allowing you to be used. You're going to get pushback from your families, from your husbands, from your children, even when mommy's not available because mommy says, I need hours to myself this week and I'm going to take it. But you can't ask for friendship without asking for respect. And so when the respect isn't naturally given to you, you have to create the standard of respect. You have to literally go hard for yourself. You have to say, hey, every Friday for 3 hours, this is my time. And I don't care what you're going through. Don't interrupt my time. Figure it out. And once they start to respect you in that way, then you can soften up a little bit. And then you can, be a little easier. But just like, I can't remember if it was Brandi or Ashunti or who said it earlier about self-care not just being the bubble baths and the cucumber, rolls on your eyes. Self-care is handling your debt. Because self-care in itself is a privilege. How could you even focus on self-care when you don't even know how you're gonna pay your bills this month? When I look at the internet now and I see so many people, oh, I had time to think about my emotions today. I know so many Black women who don't have a moment to think about anything outside of anything. They're operating on robot energy. Like, I need to get it done. I got to feed the kids. I got to go to this job, pick the kid up, go to the next job, go to this job, do this. So when you're saying you're talking about self-care and cucumbers and bubble baths and trip taking, that is a place of privilege. And I say this as someone who's gotten to that place. It's taken a long time. And I never discount the fact that where I speak from now is a place of privilege. This is not the norm or the standard, but I had to create the standard. So just remember that when you talk about self-care as a standard, stop trying to emulate what you see online and get your finances in order, get your mental health in order, get the therapist, clean your house, get a sitter for those kids. Let daddy watch the kids. I love that y'all had this whole part about co-parenting. Stop being so mad at that man and let him take the kids for a week. Please take them, because you know what I'm gonna do while you're gone? Enjoy myself. Stop being mad at dad. A lot of us are 20s, 30s years old. You got another 70 years in front of you to find somebody you want to be with. Let him go. Love yourself. That's how you create the standard. Stop being mad because he don't want to be around. Or if he does want to be around, you mad because he got a new girlfriend. So what? So what? That's how you set a standard for self-care. You have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive those around you. And you have to start loving yourself. And loving yourself does not look like being mad at everybody because they let you down. Forget them. Go find some more people. It's 1 billion plus people in this world. Go find somebody else. Right now, we virtual. Find them on the internet. Okay? That's what you go do.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
It's not necessarily on that, but something, about asking for help. And unfortunately, a lot of women, as we mentioned, a lot of us do have some privilege, but a lot of women don't know where to seek help or where to go, or even when they are, oftentimes they're criminalized for seeking help. We have a system that punishes Black women for seeking help. And, no one wants to say the R word. And I was glad within this panel that we are able to talk about racism and how racism has led to these misdiagnoses, but also this unfair treatment and incarceration of our women who are trying to seek help, who police arrest when they're calling, or child protective services take their kids away because they deem our women to be crazy. And so I think, it takes, and I know people are like, oh, well, she's the researcher, she's going to always talk about research, and there's one standard of care, but then when it comes to practice, and I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so my colleagues can talk about that, but developing a standard of care on how to help women who have maternal health challenges requires research, and requires great organizations that are doing work to make sure that we document what we're doing, that there are numbers to back it up, and that we're working in tandem with one another, because it's, as everyone mentioned, it's going to take a village to get through this, and to get through these systemic barriers that we're facing every single day.
And may I say just one thing? Because this has been phenomenal, and I feel so activated by this conversation. And I also know that there are people who are providers who are a part of this conversation right now. And so speaking to them, I think that it is bringing in this and taking a community engaged approach to birth equity and to maternal mental health, making sure that you're reaching out to and making space for and really elevating the voices of Black women to serve our community, and putting your money where your mouth is as well. Like making sure that this work, if we're committed to it, we cannot continue to do it in the margins and scraps of time. And so speaking particularly to the providers, bringing in and being able to recognize the need for cultural competence training, not just as a one-off, but as an ongoing thing, partnering with Black researchers and being able to continue to create the funding that sets the standard of care. The NIH is going to fund the people who set the standard of care. And if we don't have that access to be able to get the data to support, because we have people who are doing amazing stuff in the community who are saying, working and being able to create that change in individuals, but at that systemic level for those providers, making that an emphasis and knowing that the work will be hard, like that it's going to be hard, it's going to be messy, and it's going to take ongoing commitment.
And so we are wrapping up, but any final thoughts from anyone on the panel that you want to share? This has been such a rich conversation. The chat has been great. Any final thoughts?
Yes. I've got definitely a final thought, and I'm saying I'm not going to make it long because I am feeling all the way energized from this conversation, from all of you ladies, from sharing your stories, I've got chills, to be honest with you, thinking about just what needs to happen going forward and how we can take action. And if we're talking standards, we're talking, raising the bar, we're talking what should it be? It should be just period. We're no longer being silent about anything. We're using our voice. That's the standard. That's above and beyond. That's what we're going to do. And that's what we have to do because our lives depend on it. There is no option to say, let me think about it. Let me do a little bit more of this. No, in that moment, you have to say something. And as I talked about throughout my pregnancy and having to advocate for myself over and over again, I had an OB and she was a white woman. And I ended up staying with her because when I first moved, she was my GYN. She was real in and out. And I'm like, for that type of service, I don't need the connection, but you deserve to have the pregnancy experience that you want. But she promised me she would deliver my baby. That was the biggest thing. I wanted that one person not to be bounced around to 18 midwives, 22 OBs, because these practices, it's like a factory. To be honest, it's a baby making factory. They'll have your baby and you keep going. And one thing I want women to know is don't be silent about it. Having a baby is arguably the most vulnerable time we will ever be, especially when they're saying this whole strong narrative of things. I am vulnerable. I am not myself. I am a woman. I am just honestly gentle. I want to be just vulnerable with you. I want to be open with you. But why do I have to go in here armored? Why do I have to have on this armor as soon as I walk through the door? So I want women to know silence is no longer being tolerated. You're going in and you're making some noise. You're challenging the white coat syndrome because it's real. Do your research on these things. They do exist. Now we have Google. We have books like what Shanice has, what she just talked about. You know what I mean? We have access to things to be able to help us. So why aren't we using them? But then most importantly, knowing we don't settle for anything else in life. Why do you settle for a doctor or service that you don't like? Say no. It's okay to fire them. It's okay to break up with them. Use the whole, it's not me, it's not you, it's me. But actually, you know what? It is you. And let that doctor know. My same doctor, I had a conversation with her after because I felt like this. Any woman who's coming behind me, oh, no, you're not going to do them that way. And I told her to her face, I did not like her level of service. I did not like what happened. And she will no longer be my OB, GYN, anything going forward. And I told her office manager, because I think this needs to be talked about. And I want women to feel okay about that. I want them to feel empowered to do that. I did a podcast interview a while back, and the white was a white woman, and she was a doctor. I'm not going to say her name. She said this, and she's very much for empowering and trying not to make it a one-off. She said this: how did you feel okay? Where did the confidence come from to challenge everything that doctor said to you? Listen to that question. How did you feel okay to challenge that doctor on everything they said? They wear the white coats. And I said, you know what, that's an excellent question. I felt empowered to be able to do that because my life was on the line. It's a whole different way you're going to perform and act when you know I have to do this, or I know what the alternative could be. I could lose my life or my baby. My baby can't advocate for himself. He's in there depending on me. So it's beyond us while you're pregnant and once that baby comes. So I would say make the standard of care where I'm not being silent about anything. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to keep asking until I get the answer that I need. And we're going to still, at the end of the day, make sure that I live. Because we bring these babies on the earth side. What about these mamas? These mamas aren't making it either. But that's the whole thing. Everyone says, okay, well, as long as we get the baby here safely. Hey, what about me? What about me safely? Can I make it here too? Can I stay to raise my baby? So I want that to be the whole thing. I want women to feel empowered. I want women to have the tools. I want women to be able to connect with other women. And just like you guys were saying, be so transparent and be okay with letting that guard down. Honestly, that transformed my life when I had my baby. That's what made me be more transparent. I was one of those women where, you know what, I'm a boss, I'm getting stuff done. I don't want to, it's good until you become vulnerable and you I need to help people. But God had this happen for a reason. I will not let anyone lose their life again if I can help it. Please let me show you what I did. This is why it had to happen, because I needed to do this to be able to help others. So we're not being quiet about anything. Ask questions, stand up, challenge what they say. Remember, we're paying them. You know what I mean? It's not the opposite. You're paying them. So stand up for yourself and your baby, because we're not selling for anything less going forward at all.
Just drop on that because we are at time, and that was an awesome way to end this conversation. Thank you all so much. You all are amazing. That the work that you do. If you all don't have their social media handles, they're in the agenda. Some of them were dropped in the chat, but they're definitely on the agenda, so you can make sure you follow everyone here, and you can ask them, follow up with them directly, any questions you didn't get to. And thank you all again. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Take care, y'all.